Pushkin.
Ann Wilson is the powerhouse lead singer of the band Heart, whose celebrated classic debut album Dreamboat Annie came out nearly 50 years ago. Last week, we featured an interview with her sister and longtime bandmate Nancy Wilson, so make sure to check that out if you haven't already. Today, we'll hear from Ann, who's responsible for belting out and co-writing some of Heart's most iconic early hits, like Magic Man, Barracuda, and Crazy on You. 4 years older than Nancy, Ann was the first Wilson sister to join Heart, a band that started out as a cabaret cover band. Despite undergoing multiple lineup changes since the 70s, Heart has released top 10 albums in nearly every decade in the last 50 years, and sold over 20 million albums worldwide. Outside of Heart, Ann has also released solo material, including an album in 2023 with her band Tripsitter. On today's episode, Leah Rose talks to Ann Wilson about Heart's current world tour and the Elton John album she sings before every show to warm up her voice. Ann also explains how she would strategically place guitars around her house when having parties at her Seattle home in the 90s to encourage jam sessions with guests like Staley and Cornell. And she remembers singing on stage with Grace Slick and Stevie Nicks, who Ann says really is a witch, but a good one. This is Broken Record, liner notes for the digital age. I'm Justin Richmond. Here's Leah Rose's conversation with Ann Wilson of Heart.
Have you reimagined the band at all this time going out? I know it's been 5 years since Heart has toured. How has the band changed?
Well, the band has changed completely because nothing about it is the same except me and Nancy. Well, Ryan Waters was out in 2019. And this time we have the Tripsitter band, which is my solo band, as Heart with Ryan Waters and Nancy and I. And it is a fantastic group. It's just, wow, blows me away every time we go and play some of these old Heart songs, with this group of people. They understand the music and they just totally explode into it. It's amazing.
And the Tripsitter guys are, from my understanding, they originally were session players in Nashville.
They were, and they have reached a point in their careers, all of them, where they don't want to do that anymore as a way of life. They want their own band. They don't want to just be working for other people, doing what other people tell them to do. They want to be in a band where they have a say and they have ideas that get used and it's a real band. And that's what we have with Heart at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Heart's had many, many iterations over the decades, different lineups and different kinds of things. Sometimes it's more acoustic, sometimes it's way rock and grungy, almost like in the early 2000s. And sometimes it's pretty traditional, a classic Heart. This is something completely new. I mean, it's huge in some points, really passionate. The dynamics are incredible. I mean, I can't say enough good stuff. I guess I'm just waxing.
How do you practice when you're in a rehearsal space before you go out on tour? How can you practice to play arenas since the physical space is so different?
Well, what we hear is what we have in our heads. So that's what we practice. We're not trying to go out and address every foot of airspace in those places because that's impossible. And all the different minds. I mean, if it's a full house in a big place, it can be up to 20,000 different minds, that are out there.
Yeah.
And how do you talk to that? So you can't. You just have to get out there and be completely inside the music and inside the lyrics and be there, really mean what you say, be present, be authentic, be all the way there, That's the only thing you can do.
When you're performing, do you tend to lock eyes with certain people in the crowd, or do you find yourself just looking past the audience?
Well, I don't make an effort to lock eyes with any one person because they think that you mean something by it. Maybe you do. Maybe you do mean something by it, but I tend to be in my head sort of and fluid inside of this big sound pool that we're creating.
It sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I'll look out and I'll look at the whole panorama.
Yeah.
If they've got things lit or if it's all twinkly or something, that's pretty amazing to see from the stage.
Heart's getting ready to celebrate your 50th anniversary. You've seen the crowds change so much over the years, and now everybody has the cell phone.
Yeah,
Does that change the performance for you, the energy of the crowd?
it does change things. I gotta say, especially when they come up to the front of the stage and they turn around so that you're in the backdrop and they want to take a selfie with you as a background, I mean, that's really distracting, because you just want to sort of jump out of the way, because it's
Yeah.
I'm not a backdrop, But I mean, to be fair, it's a big night for them and they want to, preserve some little memory of it. So
Right.
why not let them have it?
I think I've read that you have an extensive vocal warm-up before you go on stage. Can you share some of that with us, what you do to get ready?
Yeah, I warm up for about 45 minutes to an hour. And I used to try and do classical, like run scales and stuff like the vocal coaches teach you to do. But I couldn't sustain that. It was just too boring. So I finally found out that my throat and soul are just as warmed up if I find a couple of records that I love and just sing along with the whole thing. Like for a while last year, I was doing Elton John, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, just sing along with the whole record, every song. And then if there's still some more time, find another one, sing along with that.
Wow.
And lo and behold, your throat is warmed up. It's not just your throat, it's your whole ability to just be open, your soul.
When did you realize that you had such a powerful voice?
I've never thought it was that powerful myself, except for a few moments in a few of the songs like Crazy on You that are high in sustained notes. And it's different when you hit a note and just hold it than if you hit a high note and just go all squirrely all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never been much one for vocal gymnastics.
The like Mariah Carey runs.
Right. Yeah, I like to sing them just simple. So when I realized I could do that, I thought, most people don't do this way. So I must have something. But I don't sit around on some kind of laurels going, wow, you sure have a strong voice. I think my kids would tell you that I have a strong voice. My or people at a birthday party when I sing happy birthday along with the crowd.
Oh, I would love to hear that. Wow. So that's fascinating. You don't think you have a strong voice?
Well, I mean, there's some mighty fine singers out there.
Yeah. Who are some of your favorite singers right now?
Well, I always loved Elton. I think in the early days, he was one of the people who influenced me the most. Right now, I would think that Billie Eilish, I love the way she sings. I mean, it's so refined and so restrained and just calm, beautiful.
Yeah.
So I admire that. I really do.
Have you tried to do something like that? Just to play around and see how it would sound?
It's all in the song.
Yeah.
If you hit the right song that has that in it, then you can do it, I think.
Yeah.
And she and her brother, I mean, the stuff they write, killer stuff. I love to see them at these big awards shows just cleaning up, because it's so, anti-establishment.
You think so?
Yeah. I mean, here she comes wearing this total alternative outfit, whatever it is, whichever thing she's at. And she looks beautiful. Her brother is just there to support her. You can tell that they're friends.
Yeah.
And that they're really tight, I love that.
I listened to you and Nancy's audiobook, Kicking and Dreaming, and was just sort of amazed at how strong the family mythology is in your family. And it really seems like you kept going back to the early days of your family and the stories that were shared in your families when it came to songwriting and decisions you made in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, you were talking about this letter that your dad wrote to your mom where he was basically proposing to her, and how that was like the single most foundational work that sort of kept inspiring your songwriting.
Yeah.
Do you still feel that influence now?
Yeah, I'll always feel influenced by both my parents because they were liberal, they were bohemian, they were romantic, and they were smart, They were both intellectuals, and they managed to find each other, and their love of poetry and literature really inspires all my songwriting, and I think Nancy's too. We're both we're both pretty romantic. Yeah.
When you left home, when you left the Seattle area, you moved to Canada, right when Heart was Hocus Pocus, before the band was even called Heart,
Mm-hmm.
and you were living with your first boyfriend, your first love. Did that live up to this mythology in your mind of your parents' bond and their romantic love?
Boy, it sure did at the beginning. Yeah, it just, like all love affairs, at the very start, it's so, as Joni Mitchell says, it's so righteous at the start,
Yeah.
and just powerful and beautiful. But you're young, and your expectation makes it be just that, makes it be mythology. It can't survive in the real world, it has to break down because it's too perfect. And that's not what this world is like. That's not what people are like. Especially when you fall in love with somebody, you idealize them to the point where they're just going to do everything for you. They're going to be your everything. And the minute you do that, that's when it starts to break down. I think
Yeah.
you got to let people have space, give them the right to be human and the right to be imperfect and not do everything for you.
When you wrote Magic Man about that relationship, were you ever embarrassed, or did you find yourself holding back because you didn't want your mom to see things that might have been a little bit scandalous at the time?
Well, holding back, I think that leaving home and running off to another country with a man was about was not holding back. But yeah, like I didn't rub it in her face that suddenly I was just off sleeping with somebody.
Right.
And she was, for all her romanticism and love she had for our father, she was pretty Victorian when it came to sex and stuff. So that was not something that went down easy between us. She just didn't want to think that I was up there blowing it. And that was in the pre-Roe v. Wade days, before it was legalized. We're back there now, but so mothers were extremely fearful of their daughters running off and getting into wild sexual relationships and ending up pregnant, not knowing what to do about it, and basically their lives being ruled by that fact from then on.
Do you remember having conversations with your mom about that, where she was warning you, like, look, this is what could happen to your life?
Yeah, she put it differently, though. She couched it more in, well, this is not dignified. This is- she didn't want to have the talk and get all clinical and everything. She didn't really want to do that. But she found a way to do it, and it was, well, if you just go up there and become barefoot and pregnant, that's like pretty trailer park trash.
Uh-huh.
And I guess that wasn't enough to scare me off it.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because some of the lyrics in Magic Man, it's almost like you're trying to convince your mom about how wonderful this guy is. He's a magic man, mama.
Yeah. Well, we had many phone calls where I was up in Canada in the cottage with him, and she wanted me to come home. But she's,
Yeah.
you got to come home. You're too young for this, I was 19, so I was old enough.
Yeah, I was so surprised to read too, and maybe it's not surprising for the time, but while you were in Hocus Pocus, you were the front person in the band. After gigs, you would come home. The band was all living together. You would come home and cook everybody dinner and do all the laundry and do all the homemaking duties.
Yeah, that didn't last that long. I mean, at first I thought how sweet it was to wash the sheets and hang them outside in the fresh air and then put them back on the bed, and try and make a dinner out of some brown rice and a couple of onions. But, and for a while we lived up there in a cabin, a cottage thing with Roger Fisher and his wife, who had just gotten married and received for a wedding gift a 50-pound sack of brown rice, which we all ended up living on because we didn't have any money when we were putting the band together. So we just ate brown rice and drank water and called it the George Oshawa brown rice diet,
And you can do that back then when you're 20.
Yeah.
And everybody's fine with it.
That's right.
And that was before Nancy joined the band?
Yes. She joined later in about 73.
We have to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more from Ann Wilson and Leah Rose. We're back with Leah Rose and Ann Wilson.
How did the band change for you when Nancy joined?
Well, I was really glad because I felt that art had gone about as far as it could go. We didn't have a very good vocal section. I mean, we didn't have a very good ability at harmony singing, and we didn't have an acoustic guitar player. So we were stuck doing rock and roll songs, like Johnny Be Good and Walking the Dog and all that kind of stuff that the guys did. And there was kind of almost a whole part of the soul of the band that was missing for me, because I had come from doing folk groups with Nancy where we did heavy harmonies and we both played acoustic guitars. And that's so when she joined, she brought that element. She's a fantastic harmony singer and a great acoustic player. So all of a sudden, heart had a heart, and we just got kind of what Led Zeppelin had, which was it can go as rock as you want, but it can also go as tender as you want down at the very center.
Yes.
And that was really satisfying to me.
Early on, you talked about you would have sort of like a mini Led Zeppelin cover section in your shows. And one night, Led Zeppelin actually came and saw you play.
Well, they didn't stop and watch us. They just walked through the room.
Did you see them walking through?
Yeah. It was a club in Vancouver called Oil Can Harry's. And they had a big showroom, and then they had a big party room upstairs. And so we saw them kind of trooping through after their concert at the arena, When they're done with the Glory gig, they come and have a party upstairs at Oil Cans. And yeah, we saw them and we all just about lost it.
I mean, I imagine they just looked like the sexiest rock stars on the planet.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then the full circle moment of having performed at the Kennedy Center for when Led Zeppelin was getting honored.
Mm-hmm.
How did you prepare for that show mentally? Was that completely intimidating to you, or are you able to just sort of switch into show mode and go out there and do your thing with full confidence?
I think that night I needed an extra measure of meditative calmness because I didn't want to go out there and start to think about it, It's what you really don't want to do. Not only was Led Zeppelin in the audience, but the president and first lady, and
Yes.
The audience was just packed with all these different luminaries and famous people of all ilks. So I just remember saying to Nancy, let's just pretend like we have bowls of water in our hands and we have to walk out there without spilling a drop and just concentrate on the water, on the song, right? And nothing else. Just be in the song. And so we did, and it turned out to be a fun experience and one that went really smooth and nothing went wrong. And it was great. Because, after all, what could possibly go wrong in a situation like that?
It is, it's such an emotional performance, and the footage after where you see, Robert Plant and the band, they're sitting there with tears streaming down their face. And then you see Barack and Michelle Obama sitting there, and John Bonham's son is playing with you all on drums. It's just so incredibly moving.
Yeah.
What a feat. It's beautiful, beautiful performance. You sounded incredible.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was quite an experience, never to be forgotten.
I read at one point that you opened for the Bee Gees.
Yeah, that was real early.
Did you have any sort of interaction with them, another family band?
I don't think at that point we got to interact with them. At that point, we were pretty much a little cabaret band in Canada. And the Bee Gees were doing a cross-Canada tour, and they needed an opener. And we'd only done one opening show before that for Rod Stewart. So we were by no means ready for that kind of exposure, but we got up and did it, I was always a huge Bee Gees fan, all their different eras and their psychedelic era and even the disco time and all that. I just thought it was all great. So yeah, it was really fun standing on this side of the stage and listening to them live after we were done,
And so that was already after the first album was out?
Yes, pretty soon after the first album was out.
What do you remember about recording that first album? Do any of the sessions stand out in your memory?
Yeah, I just remember going from knowing nothing, absolutely nothing about being in the studio, to Mike Flicker, who was our first producer, mentoring me to be able to sing a lead vocal on the songs. The first one I ever sang was Crazy on You. And we were actually doing Crazy on You in clubs at that point, and Magic Man. We hadn't written Barracuda yet, but those two other songs we would, we'd play our normal club set, and then we'd sneak Crazy on You in, and we'd sneak Magic Man in and see what the audience did. And at first they were kind of like, what? And then they'd never heard that song before, so they were used to Led Zeppelin and Elton John and the other stuff we were playing.
The stuff they know.
Yeah, and then bit by bit, they started to respond to those two songs live till it happened that they were actually coming unglued. They were applauding and standing up and liking those. So we pulled them out to when we went and opened for the Bee Gees and Rod Stewart. We actually dared to play our original stuff.
And didn't you get a huge reaction when you opened for Rod Stewart? Because it had been on the radio at that point.
Yeah, we didn't really know it. The communications in those days were not like they are now, where you know everything that goes on with your record every minute, And we didn't really understand that Dreamboat Annie was being played in Montreal by this disc jockey named Doug Pringle. He believed in us, and he played the record. So when we got to Montreal, opening for Rod Stewart, we walked out on stage to a house full of lit matches because they knew our record already. We were just this little opener, but wow, so that was just a way that we started out in Canada.
Did that motivate you to want to go in and immediately start writing more songs and continue with that specific sound of the songs that were doing well at the time?
Yeah, we wanted to just go ahead and keep on writing, and just the experience of writing the first two songs was so great and just so much fun that we just wanted to keep going. And some of the songs we wrote were more rock, but then there were a whole bunch of songs on Dreamboat Annie, like Dreamboat Annie and Love Me Like Music, I'll Be Your Song, How Deep It Goes, Soul of the Sea, ones that are really soft at the middle. So it's a mixed bag on that record. Nobody could really put their finger on what we were going to be, whether it was going to be a rock band or what.
Did you like that? Sort of keeping people guessing, or was that more like you didn't know what you guys were?
We didn't know. We were just formulating,
Yeah. Which album would you say out of your entire discography is the most true to what you think the band does best?
Maybe Little Queen, because it has Cry to Me, Go On Cry, and Barracuda, and it's got good ballads and it's got kick-ass rockers,
Yeah. Do you remember where the photograph for the cover of Little Queen was taken?
Yeah, it was taken in Elysian Park in LA, and they took us to Western costumers and got the gypsy clothes. In fact, I was wearing my own clothes that day, but everybody else was dressed up like a gypsy and rented a gypsy painted wagon and a goat and a horse and all this stuff and set up a scene.
What were you listening to at that time? So that came out in 77. What was on the radio? What were you into?
Wow, 77. Still listening to Elton John, listening to Steely Dan, listening to Moody Blues and Rolling Stones. Just all kinds of cool things,
You grew up having hootenannies in your house, playing instruments with family, singing songs. And then later, when you lived in Seattle, you would have these big parties and have a lot of the people who became like the all-stars of the grunge movement over and just jam and have fun and play.
Mm-hmm.
Around that time in the 70s, were you doing anything like that, playing with other musicians?
We were mostly playing with the members of the band. Up in Canada, we didn't know a whole lot of other musicians. It was different back then. We were the party. And we would have more fun just jamming together. On stage, off stage, it really didn't matter. We'd jam in the living room and then pack up and go out to the club and jam there, Yeah.
And at that point, so the late 70s, did you foresee a long career for the band, or was it sort of, day by day? How were you thinking about the band's future?
Oh, we definitely had a 5-year plan. I mean, our manager would not let us get out of bed without a 5-year plan. But it was good because it made sense. It wasn't just ambition. It was more about, okay, we've gone this far. Now we've got these songs. What else can we make? We've got Crazy on You. We've got Barracuda. We've got all these songs that are great. Now what,
What did you do to stir up ideas for inspiration for writing songs once those big hits were out and established?
Yeah, I think that many of our songs start from the music. And then once Nancy and I, or just me, hear the music, it suggests something. And then we start writing words. And then suddenly, lo and behold, you have a song,
Do you prefer to be by yourself at that point, or do you like to be sitting with the other musicians?
Writing words, I like to be by myself, no doubt about it. But jamming, you have to be with other people. You have your ideas and they have their ideas, and how they mix, and you spark ideas off each other. And you can tell when you hit on something, and it's great.
Would people in the band give you feedback on your lyrics? Say like, maybe this line should be tweaked a little bit?
Occasionally.
How would you take that as a writer?
Well, if they did that, I would say, and what would you put in its place? And if they had a good suggestion, I'd go, okay, we'll use that maybe. If they didn't have a good suggestion, I'd say, shut up. Not literally shut up, but just, we'll keep it my way until you think of something better,
Yeah. After the first initial band disbanded, people left, and there was a new iteration of the group, was that really heartbreaking for you, or did you have hope that we can create something new and move on?
It's hard to describe what it was like when that lineup disbanded, other than to say that we couldn't get along anymore. And things got really difficult between us, It seemed like the thing that made Heart unusual which was men and women working together as equals, was breaking down. And that very thing was the thing that was driving us apart from each other. We would just squabble and write down gender lines. It would just be really difficult. The men gossiping about the girls and the girls gossiping about the men. And it didn't help that, Nancy and I never looked that fondly on the whole world of groupies and having to explain to the band wives, no, nothing goes on out there, lie to them all the time. And it just got to be weird.
When you reformulated the band and then bring in more men, did it feel like things are going to end up differently this time? Or did it seem like maybe it'll kind of play out in the same way?
Yeah. Well, I always go into every new iteration of the band totally optimistically because the world is full of good people. And just because you play out your relationship with some people doesn't mean you don't have one with others. And we've been really fortunate to play with some great musicians over the years, men and women. And it's not really important to us, to me, or to Nancy and I, which gender it is. It really isn't. It's just who can do the job, who's a great player, who's a great singer, who's a great writer. And we worked with Holly Knight and Debbie Scher and Denny Carmassi on drums, and just some amazing players. But we never again encountered the same kind of emotional hardship we did with that first lineup. I think it was because we all started out, we were poor and destitute, and then we had all this success, and there was all this money that came in, and money changes everything, and everybody gets kind of different.
Do you think they started to resent you because you were the front person and getting a lot of attention, and Nancy and you were getting a lot of attention?
Yeah, there was some of that because they were the men in the band were out there working just as hard as us and putting their bodies on the line too. But yet, whenever we did an interview, Nancy and I were the only ones that got talked to and got all the attention, and there's nothing much that we could do about it. It's just how it was. And it really hurt the men's feelings and made them angry. So I don't blame them at all, really.
Yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah.
Are you still in touch with the old members from the original lineup?
Yeah. We saw them just a couple months ago when we played in Seattle. They all showed up.
Super cool.
Yeah.
And then moving into the 80s, that was when you started the record label, when you signed to Capitol, started bringing in professional songwriters.
Yes.
How was that for you as a songwriter and as somebody who had been the face of this band for so long?
Yeah. I went back and forth on it. It depended on the song. For instance, I thought These Dreams was a really great song. Just a beautiful song that fit Nancy's voice just perfect. It was the ideal marriage, But some of the other songs that came our way that we did during the 80s, I thought didn't have much substance and were pretty calculated. They were just different versions of what was being played on the radio.
Right.
Already. And I wasn't that fond of that because, I was there at the beginning when we had all this beautiful idealism about being poets and all that.
Are you glad now, looking back, that you did it even though you were fundamentally opposed to it at certain times about what you were singing? Are you glad you tried it and stuck with it?
Sure, yeah. It was a good experience, and it did teach me a lot about songwriting. Just the basic lesson of you don't tax people's attention span. You just don't get all selfish and just go, well, this is my vision. Like you want to talk directly to them, and connect with them. That's what a lot of those songs in the 80s had. It was a good lesson.
I love those songs.
Yeah, some of them are cool.
Super cool. And I bet the crowd loves them when you play them live.
Yeah. Like we used to do a Lisa Del Bello song called Wait for an Answer that moves through 5 keys and everything. And it's just amazingly powerful song. And that taught me so much. about how you can have a very simple idea and just repeat it, only take it up a key and then up another key, and then it just changes meaning every time you go up.
With these dreams, is that the song that you said you can't sing for whatever reason? There's something about that song that you've tried it in karaoke and you can't sing it?
Don't sound that good on these dreams. The times I've tried it at karaoke, yeah, it's just, there's something about it I feel awkward singing it. And I sound awkward. But that's Nancy's song.
Do you still not sing All I Want to Do?
We haven't done that for a long time.
Is it going to come back out?
I don't think so. There's a lot cooler stuff that we can bring out than that.
That song had a big influence on my, it was very eye-opening as a young girl.
Yeah. And just not in a very cool way, but now I'm being my mother, you know? That's my mother talking.
We have to take another quick break, and then we'll be back with more from Leah Rose and Ann Wilson. We're back with the rest of Leah Rose's conversation with Ann Wilson.
In your book, you talked about some of the compromises you made in the 80s were a devil's bargain, what you were wearing, the types of songs you were performing. How did you manage to push past that era?
Oh, you just live one breath after another, you know, you just keep on going. And I always believed in heart. I always believed that we would emerge from that and that we would come up again and be writing our own type of music about the things we wanted to write about, and that people would like them. Maybe not on the same massive level, but on a level.
Does that matter to you if, as someone who as a musician has experienced both the massive arena level and then also you do a lot of small shows that are very intimate,
Mm-hmm.
as a songwriter, as a musician, as a singer, does it matter to you, or is all that matters is just performing?
When I'm doing it, it's all that matters is just the performing. I think other people care more about the level of success than I do. You know, I've been accused of not caring enough about writing commercial songs. And I admit I'm guilty. I just want to write lovely songs. I want to write cool stuff.
Are you writing right now?
Yeah, I am. And I'm just about to go down to Nashville and hang out with the Tripsitters and write some more songs.
What about the Love Mongers? Are they ever going to get back together?
Oh, Love Mongers. Yeah. Now that was a vocal group.
Yeah.
That was some gorgeous vocals. I don't know. I hope so. That was a fun band. It was really fun.
So that was Nancy, yourself, and your old friend Sue?
Uh-huh. And our other friend, Frank Cox. Frank has a beautiful tenor voice, and I was playing bass and singing. So we had really good 3-part harmonies, and we could do whatever we wanted. We didn't do much Heart stuff. We used the Love Mongers as an escape from Heart for a while. Just after the 80s, we went into Love Monger land for a while and just did whatever we wanted.
Is that around the time that you were back in Seattle and starting to hang out with some of the musicians that were coming up then?
Yeah. And oddly enough, a lot of those musicians that were part of the Seattle community then loved the Love Mongers, and we loved them, and we'd all show up at each other's shows, and it didn't matter that it was at this little club. It really didn't matter.
Yeah.
It was just about the music and about playing, camaraderie.
You've said that musicians from Seattle aren't just going to be nice about a song because you're sitting there playing it. They're really honest about their feedback.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Can you remember a time where you had an interaction with a Seattle musician and you're just like, oh.
Yeah. Jerry Cantrell, he told me on a number of occasions, it was one of the ballads, the more commercial ballads from the 80s. Maybe it was All I Want to Do. But he just said to me, that is such bullshit. That is such bullshit. Now, Barracuda That's great. That's the shit, you know?
And you're like, I agree with you.
I agree with you.
When everybody would come over to your house and play at those parties, how does that happen? Like people start out drinking and then eventually people pick up instruments and are just playing songs, or what was the scene like?
Well, I was no fool. I would always have, in my living room, I'd have guitars laying around, casually, you know, laying around, and a piano and a couple of little amps. Usually it would happen after somebody's concert, and everyone would show up for the concert, and then whoever was free afterward would show up at my house, and they'd all come in and start drinking beers and smoking ciggies and sitting up on my counters and just then pretty soon somebody would start to play.
What do you remember being played then? And who do you remember being there?
I remember one time John Waits was there, Lane Staley, the Pearl Jam guys, the Artist of Spoon Man, Chris Cornell and the Kim Thale and all them.
What was it like singing with Chris Cornell?
Beautiful. He's like one of those naturals, like he comes from a musical family too. And not only did I know Chris, I knew his sister, Maggie, who's a great singer too. So it was easy as pie to sing with Chris.
Beautiful voice.
Yeah.
Was there ever any stories about Jimi Hendrix, another Seattle musician? Like, was he part of the lore at all?
I never met Jimmy myself, but I did go and poke my head into Jimmy's apartment one time.
Oh, how did that happen?
when he lived in Seattle, when he was just a young guy before he blew the coop, you know. Yeah, just I was going to art college and somebody wanted to go pick up some weed or something, and we stopped at this little apartment and they went, "Look around. This is a famous apartment." You know, I mean, the people who were living there then were not Jimmy, but look around. This place has much vibe, you know.
Yeah, trying to feel the vibe of Jimmy. That's so cool. What stands out in your mind when you think about the 70s or 80s? What was the biggest rock star moment that you had once the band started to pick up notoriety, where you looked at Nancy like, whoa, this is big time?
As time goes along, you meet just about everybody. They usually end up just being people, but that doesn't mean they're disappointing. Met a lot of cool people, and some who, yes, were just folks, you know.
Yeah.
You think they're going to be like so grand and everything, and then they're just like, "Hey, hi, how are you?"
Well, I know that there was stories about you hanging out with Stevie Nicks, and that's always seemed like a cool hang.
She jumped on our plane for a few days. We had a #1 record. That's what it was. That was the magnetism. And we were playing in San Francisco. She came out to the show and got up on stage with us and with Grace Slick to sing on What About Love. And after the show, she said, "Gee, I kind of hate to say goodbye to you guys. Where are you going next?" And we said, "Well, we're going to Phoenix." And it just so happened that Stevie has another house in Phoenix. So she got on our plane the next day, and we all went out to Phoenix and went to her house and hung out after our show. And that was an eye-opener. It was cool because she's everything she says. I mean, she's a white witch. I mean, she's definitely got her self-image down and together. She's very smart, super creative.
Did you get to sing with her at all?
Just when she got up on stage with us.
Okay. So when you're hanging out, you didn't sit around sing and...
No, we mostly listened to each other talk. I don't know. You don't have that much to say, really, that you don't all feel as a group because you're all going through the same experiences.
How was that for you coming home in between stops on tour when you would go home and see your parents and see your older sister, Lynn? Was it hard to relate to them and sort of come down from being on the road?
Yeah, everyone tells you that you've changed and that you're faking it. You're not the same person. Like everyone's always really disappointed in you because you're living on this big inflated level. But that's how it gets when you're out on those big tours like that. You live in a bubble of safety and security, and you're protected from people just because, for one, you don't want to get sick, and for two, some people can be dangerous. So you have to have protection from all of that, and you get used to it. And you go home and you're kind of like, don't come near me.
Yeah, I imagine you need a couple of weeks to kind of reformulate.
Yes, indeed.
Does that take a lot of mental preparation for you to be removed from your space, from your home, and know you'll be sort of a nomad?
Takes a lot of relaxation out there. That's the main thing for me, is just to relax enough to have fun with it and not get all freaked out, about not being home and being tired or whatever, like the things that are hard about touring, which is the travel.
Are you traveling on buses mostly when you're in the US?
Yes, on buses. However, over in Europe, they don't do that anymore because of the European Union is broken up. So you can't just go from country to country on a bus. You have to go through customs and all that. The bus can't leave the country, So it's much more complex now over there.
After taking the 5-year break from touring with Heart, how did you and Nancy come back together? Why did you decide to tour now?
It was time. There was no longer any reason to hold off on it. I had spent pretty much all of last year touring with Tripsitter, and we did 100 shows in 7 months. I thought, well, the time is right. Let's see if we can bring back the big guns. And she was into it. We had some negotiations to do. Who was going to be in the band, what type of a show we're going to do. But we came to understandings and all that.
I was looking through your Instagram and I saw that you have some scattered posts about meditation and quotes from Ram Dass and other things. When you're talking about relaxation before the shows, what are some techniques that you use to get into a good headspace?
I like to listen to music that is meditational, that's based around a drone, just calming down that way, breathing. I don't want to build up. I want to chill down before a show. So I walk out there completely calm and collected. And so those are the main things, is just relax into it.
And then when you make that transition from backstage to stepping out on stage in an arena filled with people, filled with energy, is it hard to make that switch for you?
Well, it depends on how tired I am, I guess. If it's a good night and everything's clicking and I feel good, then it's not hard. But if something's gone on or, something's wrong within the band, like someone's sick or something like that, it's a little harder to go out there with all the engines thrusting.
At what point in the tour would you say is the best to see Heart? Would it be in the beginning parts of the tour, the middle, the latter end?
Oh, that's impossible to say. I think it's different every tour. I don't know how this band is going to develop, because it really is like a development over a tour. You go out and you're fresh out of rehearsal and everything's just all perfect, and then you start to open up like a big flower.
Yeah.
And you figure out where it is that the audience and yourself really connect and grow with those places. So if you see us halfway through the tour, it's going to be different than the first couple of nights.
Yeah. Do you have the same set list every show, or does the set list change?
It will change. We have a bunch of stuff worked out that we can interchange whenever we like. And sometimes we're writing, so things can just be popped in. So yeah, it'll change, definitely.
Is there any sort of preview you can give us about what type of show it will be?
It's going to look beautiful. It is going to be a combination of Heart songs, no covers, all Heart songs, and a couple of new songs, a new Nancy song and a new Ann song.
Tell me about the last thing you've written that you're really excited about.
Oh, I just got through making an album with Tripsitter that is called Another Door, and came out so good. That is what I'm really proud of right now, because I was the sole lyric writer on all the songs, and it really taught me a lot. I learned a lot about how to do it and just when to edit myself and when not to, that's so important.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
Nice to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks to Ann Wilson for talking about Heart's storied history. You can see Ann and her sister Nancy on tour with Heart through December. And you can hear our favorite songs from Heart along with their various side projects on a playlist at brokenrecordpodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at Broken Record. Broken Record is produced and edited by Leah Rose with marketing help from Eric Sandler and Jordan McMillan. Our engineer is Ben Tolliday. Broken Record is a production of Pushkin Industries. And if you like this show, please remember to share, rate, and review us on your podcast app. Our theme music's by Kenny Beats. I'm Justin Richmond.